y'all, I'm Ada. So you know when you find something interesting and you're like, hey, I want to watch this, and then you tell it to some people, but they already experienced it, and they're like, hey, don't watch this if you value your life, but then you're like, well, it couldn't be that bad, could it? But then it's just as bad as everyone said. Well, that was exactly my experience when I discovered that the Salty's Lighthouse version of Tugs is the absolute worst thing to exist ever. But why is that? Well, first let's take a step back. What's Tugs, and what's Salty's Lighthouse? I actually made a video on Tugs recently, so you can go check that out if you want a good idea of what that show's about. You can click the little eye, or is it an eye anymore? I don't know. YouTube makes weird updates, man. But to keep things brief, Tugs was a show produced in the late 80s by the same company who worked on Thomas the Tank Engine before the show went to CGI. It was essentially a sister show / spiritual successor to Thomas, just with tugboats primarily instead of trains. The show is about two rival fleets of tugboats competing for the best jobs in the harbor, all while navigating various hardships, no pun intended, all set during the 1920s in America. The show only lasted for 13 episodes, had a limited run on home media, and never made it as far as North America in terms of broadcasting. But that's where Salty's Lighthouse comes in. Salty's Lighthouse was a preschool show produced in the 90s, primarily in Canada, but aired in multiple countries around the world. It was about a kid named Salty and the various adventures he had with his sea creature friends in a lighthouse. Along the way, Salty and his friends would learn valuable life lessons from each other, Salty's anchovy, and from watching the tugboats in the harbor. Those tugboats being the characters from Tugs. So, yeah, somehow, and supposedly this was to fit in with the sailor theme of Salty's Lighthouse, the production crew ended up gaining the license to use episodes of Tugs as segments in Salty's, and probably also because another show called Shining Time Station, which was for little kids, was America's first introduction to Thomas the Tank Engine, fun fact. So Salty's Lighthouse most likely thought they could do the same thing with Tugs for America, and have that be a success too. Spoiler alert, it didn't really work out. So here's how it worked. Every so often in an episode, let's say about every 2 minutes or so, a character would look through a pair of binoculars called Seymour to see what the tugboats had gotten up to in a little place called Snugboat Harbor, which would lead into the Tug story. However, what was actually being witnessed was some of the most horrendous editing, subpar voice acting, and the most repetitive and basic kid stories ever. But before we officially get into all that, I want to give a few disclaimers. Number 1, if you personally like the show, that's lovely. It's not you that I'm trying to harp on in this video, it's the show itself, because it is honestly not very good. Number 2, considering this is a preschool show, you're probably wondering why I am talking about this. Like, it's not my demographic, why am I talking about the show? And you're right that it's not my demographic, but I'm going to read you this. Salty's Lighthouse is a show made for little kids. Tugs wasn't, at least originally back in the 80s. Also, I feel like I need to point this out. Most people, whatever the age, really only knew about Salty's Lighthouse in the first place because of Tugs, so I kind of feel like I have that going for me. That's a fun fact. And then this leads me to my final disclaimer, which is I'm not going to talk about Salty's Lighthouse as a whole. I am only going to talk about the Tugs segments within Salty's Lighthouse, because that's the main focus. Tugs has been my main focus, so there's that. Yeah. Got it? Great. Then let's begin. Let's start off with the editing, namely the clip splicing. Salty's uses clips from Tugs a lot, normally using clips from vastly different episodes and putting them together to create their stories. This, honestly, I feel is one of the few things in this show that really can't be helped. It makes sense. Tugs only came out with so many episodes, and so it's really understandable that Salty's would have to get creative, using bits and pieces from different episodes here and there, and recontextualize them to create original stories for Salty's Lighthouse. But then you have clips that are edited together even though they take place at different times of day, like here.
Got away anchor, mates. See ya!
And then you have some genius who decides to do this.
Push, pull, tug.
Sunshine hears him and answers. Push, pull, tug.
There she is!
I promise you I did not do that myself. This is actually from the show. Also, there are multiple instances where some clips from some episodes will just show up extremely frequently. For example, Regatta and Trapped are probably some of the most used episodes for Salty's Lighthouse I've ever seen, because they mainly are used to formulate plot points for the stories. For example, anytime they need a trapped waterway, they use the footage from Trapped, where the tramp steamer gets stuck in the canal. And in Regatta, there's literally any time that a festivity thing needs to happen, they use the parade from Regatta. There's so many other examples I could probably list off, but I am being completely honest when I say that list is very long. Continuing on about the editing in general, there's also reversed footage. Honestly, I'm sure the editors probably enjoyed doing this, since it gave them a break from mashing various episode clips together 24/7, but my goodness, it just is so weird. Take this clip for instance.
Don't be shy about what you do, do-da, do-da. You're strong and brave and you are you all the work long day.
Again, I swear, that is not me editing this footage, this is actually from the show. And to make matters weirder, there's actually an entire episode that revolves around this. As far as I can remember, it's called Backwards Day, and it's basically just all the characters talking about, hey, it'd be funny if this part from this episode was actually in reverse, except it's like different actual events that happen and not episodes. For example, they were like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if the parade from Regatta was in reverse, and then also the rail bridge falling in high tide, though it's not the same story as high tide, and it's just Top Hat talking about this one time he saw a bridge fall. And I'll give the episode this, it's not a terrible premise in and of itself, but it just feels very weird to watch. I honestly think it's like a YTP almost, but if a YTP actually had like a budget and a production crew. Anyways, moving on. So next you have the multitude of changes the production crew at Salty's made to Tugs, and this also very honestly makes sense for them to do. With the big age demographic difference between the two shows, it's kind of obvious they have to tone some stuff down and change other stuff to appeal to the younger and much broader audience. Some of these changes I believe are relatively understandable, while others I will have absolutely no clue as to why they ever did it. For starters, gender swaps. With this show running on essentially the Smurfette principle, that is to say there were one or two non-agency girls to about a bajillion guys, it makes sense that Salty's would have to change a few characters' genders to balance things out, for lack of a better phrase, and so they could help appeal to the wider audience of kids. In Salty's, they changed 3 characters specifically from male to female. These characters were Captain Star.
After a lot of hard bargaining, it looks like I've managed to land the ocean liner contract for one of the biggest liners around.
Stir Tugs, what's the problem? I didn't have a clue what to give Otis for his birthday, but now I can give him a brand spanking new engine.
Little Ditcher, a harbor crane.
Been dredging, just for pulley to go back in place and I'm yours. I'll do the best I can, Tan Sleds.
I'm right behind you, Warrior. Unless you lose me and spin me around or something silly like that.
And finally, Sunshine.
Hey, 10 cents. A great dawn, eh? Oh, it's bad weather coming then.
And I made plans for us to play Ring Around Lily Lightship. Hey, maybe Grampus doesn't want the party.
They also ended up making Sunshine and 10 Cents related, with 10 Cents being the big brother to Sunshine as the little sister. And then you also got name and personality changes. These are also pretty understandable, though, at least in my opinion, only understandable to an extent. For starters, Zebedee. In Salty's, Zebedee's name was changed to Zeby. For my personal belief, I think it's simply because the name Zebedee is hard for little kids to pronounce. Now, whether that means his name is said as ZB or like initials, like ZB, I don't even think the show knew because it's never specified. I just always like to call him ZB because I think it's much worse. And as far as other name changes go, you also have Big Mac and OJ, who got their names changed to Big Stack and Otis respectively. And supposedly these names were changed to avoid controversy. Big Mac was changed to Big Stack, supposedly because they feared McDonald's suing, which makes some kind of sense, but this was never an issue with Tugs when his name was Big Mac. Why would it be the case here? Did they forget McDonald's exists in the UK? And OJ was changed to Otis, either to not confuse kids with the breakfast drink, which is weird, or because of the O.J. Simpson controversy at the time, which little kids would probably never get anyway, so again, I ask, why? And then you have these two guys, Burke and Blair. In Tugs, they were nefarious scrap dealers who, in one episode, were continuously after O.J. because his engine kept acting up.
We don't sit around our breaker's yard watching our staff turn old boats into scrap, do we, Mr. Blair?
Always on the lookout for who's next to go. That's our business, and OJ's top of our list.
But in Salty's, they're Mr. Boffo and Mr. Sacco, and they're movie makers. And they want Otis, for their next movie instead of buying him for scrap.
You've probably seen our Boffo Sacco movies. Beauty and the Boat, Jurassic Harbor, Tug Ranch.
Can I get a mood whiplash? Moving on once again, let's talk about the stories now. A good chunk of them are original, like I said earlier, but a couple do actually take on a loose adaptation of an actual episode of Tugs. But when I say loose, I mean so loose that your shoelace is going to get untied in the next 3 steps while you walk to Spanish class. Take, for example, almost every episode that includes a parade. And if you couldn't guess, most of them are based off of the episode Regatta. Sometimes, though, a story will even include one of the big dilemmas from Regatta, either Lily's of being rammed by a tramper, or Grampus's of literally being blown up by the Navy. It depends on the episode, but most of the time, Regatta is mainly used to show the characters having some sort of celebration. Another example, but this one actually somewhat follows the plot of the original episode, the segment from episode 4, titled Blackout. It pretty much follows the basic plot of Ghosts, in which everyone thinks they see ghost boats until they actually turn out to not be ghosts at all in the first place. Throw in some of that old Salty's goodness, and you have a somewhat tolerable episode, depending on how much you already like the ghosts. And as for the original stories, take the segment known as Grampus' Song. In this story, Grampus is trying to find someone who can sing a song he made for a music festival. Why can't he sing it himself? He says he sounds very warbly and like he's underwater singing it, but he's a submarine, why wouldn't he already know that? I digress. So when he asks everyone else, hey, can you sing my song for me? I want to hear what you sound like singing my song. Everyone else's entry is either bad for laughs or honest to goodness, just straight up horrendous. Especially the Z-Stacks version, but I'm not even going to play that for you because I don't want to lose my eardrums again, and I'm sure you don't want to either. Let's just say it was in a style of music none of them should have known about at the time period. But, yes, the songs. Let's talk about those, because yes, in this show there are songs, and they're just about as good as one would expect. But when I say songs, I don't mean as in full-on musical numbers. Instead, I'm talking about small tunes that one or more characters in the show will sing from time to time. They're kind of like a sort of running thing. These songs can honestly range from mediocre at best to almost making you want to cry. And the songs themselves wouldn't be so bad if any of these guys could actually carry a tune.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Why do they think I'm so mean and nasty? I'm just trying to do my work.
Listen, it's Zoran!
So Captain Zero won't think I'm a jerk.
As you can hear from that beautiful clip, Zoran's voice absolutely sucks when he's singing, and he's 10 times the asshole anyways in Salties, so his voice automatically sucks. Big Stack, his voice is intentionally meant to be bad, which wouldn't be so bad on its own, but his voice is legitimately irritating. I don't even find it funny like the show wants me to. And everybody else ranges from either not too terrible to please shut up. The only one whose singing voice I can at least sort of tolerate is 10 Cents, but even then it's pretty hard to censor some of the stuff he sings, and he, believe me, does that a lot.
Fuel days, soon there'll be some really cool days. When we're watching, we are learning push, pull, tug. And I love working with my sister right here in the bay.
So with all of this being said, now we come to the big question of the video. Did Salty's Lighthouse succeed with its mission of bringing Tugs over to an American audience? No, not at all. Judging by how little people even know about Tugs today, I'd say absolutely not. The show changed way too much of Tugs to keep any of its original identity. The voice acting is decent at best, the dialogue can be pretty awkward, the songs just feel forced in and serve little to nothing with the stories that are being told, and the stories themselves just feel like either bargain bin versions of the actual stories from Tugs, or original bottom-of-the-barrel stories solely for kids to digest and learn simple morals from. It's no wonder people watched this show and just dismissed it as another show for little kids like Thomas the Tank Engine, when in reality it's just so much more than that. And that's a huge shame. But I will say this. If you've never seen Tugs before and watched this show, I could understand if you liked it. I could understand if you thought it was okay. At the end of the day, it's just a basic and harmless show for preschoolers, nothing more and nothing less. And there is also the fact to keep in mind that these segments were just one part of a larger story, that being the actual episode of Salty's Lighthouse. So maybe someone watching this had no want for the Tugs segments to begin with, and that's fine. Each segment is about 5 minutes per episode anyway. These stories are actually pretty fast. But even with all of this, it just doesn't forgive the fact that for Tugs' official introduction to an American audience, and a North American audience as a whole, it was a pretty bad one. And so I recommend, like in my Tugs video, go and watch the original Tugs. Even if you're not a fan of Thomas the Train Link shows in general, at least please give Tugs a chance. It's so much better than what I've shown you from Salties, I promise you. And with that, this video has reached its end. But not really. And now it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Look How They Massacred My Boys. I could not think of anywhere else to show this off, so I'm just going to make this a whole segment, but enjoy anyway. Basically, in the cartoon introduction to Salty's Lighthouse and like the little theme song, there's one shot that shows off cartoon renditions of a couple of the characters from Tugs. It's like a few seconds long, but my friend from Discord sent me this image of all of them in like one big screenshot. I don't know how else to word this. But basically, here's how the segment is going to go. I'm going to share this image with all of you guys. You get a couple seconds to see a few things that could be off with the image compared to how the actual characters look in Tugs. And then when the timer's up, I'll list off everything I found in this image and we can compare answers. Ready? Let's go. Alright, time's up. Let's check the answers. Number 1. There's very odd discoloration on some of these guys. For example, OJ's funnel isn't red despite him being part of the Starfleet. Hercules has this weird blue ring at the top of his funnel, but none of the other stars do. And for some reason, Sunshine's hull, I think it's a hull, I'm not good with boat terminology. Sunshine's hull is the only one colored blue. Number 2, speaking of Sunshine, why is he so small? I get he's small in Tugs, but he's not that small. He's only a little shorter than 10 cents. He's not, like, so small that he could be a literal 3-year-old's bathtub toy. I don't get why he's this small. Number 3, 10 cents looks extremely high. I just feel like that was something I had to point out to all of you. Number 4, again, something I feel I have to just point out. Top Hat looks like Buzz Lightyear. I just don't know. It was one of the first things I saw when I saw this image. I just can never unsee it, and now I'm just going to subject it to all of you so you can never unsee it. It wouldn't even be that bad if they just drew his monocle on his face, but it's not there. He looks so weird without the monocle. Could they not just have drawn a circle on his face? Even if they couldn't draw, like, an indicator that it's a monocle, could they not have just drawn a circle over one of his eyes? Number 5, and this is one that my friend in Discord even pointed out to me, OJ doesn't have his paddles, despite him explicitly being mentioned as being a paddle boat tug. Would it not have been that hard for the artist to draw cylinders to express that? Then again, they couldn't really draw a circle to indicate Top Hat's monocle, so I guess nothing goes in cheap animation. Number 6, I don't know how else to say this, but Hercules is chumby. I don't know why this is, considering that in Tugs he's probably one of the most freaking chiseled characters I've ever seen. Maybe it's the angle at which he's drawn, I don't know. It just looks a little odd. Actually, no. You know what? I do think I know why that is. See, here's my headcanon that I've come up with. The artist drawing this thought they were actually drawing Warrior, but then their boss came by saying like, "Oh, nice job on Hercules," and then they left. And then the artist looked at the clock. They saw they had like 2 minutes left to finish this drawing, and then they were like, "Screw it!" So they just drew Hercules' face and hat over Warrior's body. Number 7, and this is the final one, I promise. I think it speaks honestly volumes that the most normal-looking characters are the 2 Z guys that were placed in the very far back of this image. I think those are Zug and Zebedee. I don't know. I don't care to know. And so concludes this segment of Look How They Massacred My Boys. See you guys next time. Okay, now I promise this video is actually over. And I cannot thank you guys enough for watching this to the end, if you made it this far. And I also really want to give an extra special thanks to my friend on Discord, Shane. Without him, I would never have ever been introduced to Tugs, and I also have to thank him because he helped me with both the script and my original script for Tugs. So, again, huge thanks to him. And as for you, the viewer, you can go ahead and show your appreciation if you like this video, and I'll see you guys soon. So, bye.